Hello, everybody. Welcome to Associated Studios Industry Talks with me, Scott Harrison, and we have the incredible, wonderful Eamonn O'Dwyer this evening. Before I introduce this wonderful guest we've got, I just want to tell you all, if you're new to this, what this is all about. At Associated Studios, we decided that we're kind of, a little bit bored of all of the stuff that's going on, and there's just so many people out there that need a little bit of inspiration. So we decided to take our industry talks, which were a class with our students, online, which is what this is now. So we talk with people from the performing arts industry, and we've got some really awesome people lined up. And you can take part in the chat. You can either join us on Twitch. We currently have some Twitch people. So say hi in the Twitch chat if you're there. And also we've got some wonderful people on Facebook Live as well. And you can come and chat to us on both of these things. If you're watching this on my profile, you're going to have to, I'm not looking at that. So you're going to have to come and talk to me on Associated Studios Facebook page. So make sure you go over to the Associated Studios Facebook page and join in the chat. We're going to be answering all your questions live. So without any further ado, I'm going to just introduce our wonderful guest this evening. We've got the incredible composer, Eamonn. Welcome. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny old life at the moment.
It is a funny old life, isn't it?
We're surviving.
Yeah, we are. We're thriving. Let's say that we're moving to a thriving mindset. That's what I
that's very good. Very good. Okay, good. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, we're trying our best anyway. But yeah, so for those of you that are maybe new to Eamonn is an incredibly well-established composer. I was going to say young composer, but of course he's incredibly young, that goes without saying. But he's done an incredible amount in his career so far, having worked with places like the RSC and the Old Vic and many other different things. So basically, rather than me talking about you, would you like to just share a little bit about what you've been up to and the kind of things that people know you for?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny that the young composer thing, actually, because I'm not all that young, but I haven't been doing it all that long. I had quite a long career as an actor musician before I started composing. So I did my last acting job about 6 years ago. And there was a sort of period where I was doing a little bit of both, and what I used to call credit crunch casting, which was when they would book me to be in a show and play instruments and also write the music and MD it as well. And that was kind of my transition. But I suppose certainly as an actor, the biggest thing I would have done was Warhorse in the West End. And that really marked the end of me wanting to be a performer, because I sort of felt like I peaked with that show. It was such an amazing piece of theatre, standing ovations of 1,000 people every night. I didn't really know where to go as a performer after that. And that was when I started to write my first musical, because I had all that lovely time on my hands during the day. So I wrote my first show, which was called The House of Mirrors and Hearts, which back then was on in a tiny little venue up in Edinburgh, but then we got a little transfer to the Arcola. It was then picked up by the wonderful Perfect Pitch, who developed it with us for a few years. And then we went back to the Arcola with a sort of newer, bigger version of that, directed by Ryan McBride, who now runs the Mercury Theatre in Colchester. And that show now has been performed in America and in Australia and in Wolverhampton a couple of years ago.
Which we love, because we are obviously... we're partnered with Wolverhampton's University, so yeah.
Oh, right,
so it's much more important than America, of course, yeah.
So that was... that's been a kind of... a lovely thing that started as a hobby that then has turned into, I mean, I'd love to say moneymaker. It isn't really, but it's a thing that lives on, which is really nice. And in terms of musical theatre, I wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow for the NYMT. That was a lovely commission that my good friend Helen Watts and I had, 2018 is that now, or 2017? I lose track of time. And we also did a lovely little show called Mrs. Beaton Says for the Bristol Vic Theatre School. Again, a really lovely commission. They had a sort of particularly talented group of graduating actors, and they wanted to give them a musical. So it was a real sort of bespoke piece playing to all of their strengths, which was really lovely. And I'm trying to do some more kind of contemporary stuff at the moment. All the stuff I've written, I mean, House of Mirrors and Hearts is a funny one because it's not set in any particular time period. It's kind of modern day language, but there's no mention of, car keys or the internet or jobs even. So it's got a kind of fairy tale feel. But everything else I've written has been very much sort of 1910 and earlier. So I'm trying to do more contemporary stuff, which is quite exciting. So I've been working on a little podcast musical that's hopefully coming out in a couple of months' time. And the other big thing that I finished was Fanny and Stella, my musical about two Victorian drag queens, or Victorian female impersonators, as they were called then. So lockdown 1 enabled me and my collaborator Siobhan to finish that back in the autumn. So we're kind of now looking for opportunities for that, but obviously it's a tricky time
of course.
to be doing anything.
Of course,
especially with big new shows. It's not social distancing friendly, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So we'll see what comes of that. But that is it's a period show, but it's very modern in its kind of language and its music and that kind of thing. So yeah.
I love that. That's great. It's very interesting. You said there, that it's that what you do is not a moneymaker, as it were. And I think that's really important for people to really hear, because of course, even being an actor muso, kind of getting a job like Warhorse, of course, pays the bills, but that's not always that's not kind of like that's not what you fall into when you kind of go straight into the career and the rest of it. And I think everybody, that whether a performer or composer or any kind of artist or creative, understands that there's not necessarily kind of a salary attached to what we do. So my question to you is, what is it you therefore kind of like, what is it that keeps you going? What is it that keeps you involved in this rather than chasing a salary or chasing security? What is it that drives you to kind of continue to actually take risks, which of course you have to do as a writer?
Well, I'll give you a sort of slightly roundabout answer to that. I've kind of got two strands to my work, because my work in musical theatre, while every so often there are nice commissions, those more often than not start life as passion projects. I started to write musicals because I couldn't see a musical that I wanted to be in as a performer. That's where I started. So it was entirely a hobby, a kind of, I can sit down, and as a composer and a lyricist, I can sit and start a musical on my own in my flat right here. But as the other thing I do is compose for theatre and sound design and stuff like that. So the work that I did for the Old Vic, the work that I've done for the RSC, that's been music for plays. And I love that almost as much as I love the musical theatre, but I need somebody to be doing a production of Hamlet for me to write the music for it. I can't just do Hamlet on my own. So in terms of chasing the salary, I do a lot of the sound design. A lot of the sound design work affords me the opportunity to do a lot of the musical theatre writing. And I think even if I wasn't being paid to do the sound design work and the theatre work, I would still want to be writing musical theatre. So in terms of what drives me, God, just always wanting things to be better, I think.
Do you mean that in terms of your writing,
so inspired by?
Sorry, do you mean that in terms of you want your next writing project?
Yeah.
Do you want the world to be better, or what is it you want to be better?
Sometimes it's the industry, if I'm going to be honest. I get really inspired by seeing good theatre, but I also get really inspired by seeing theatre that I don't care for, because that makes me want to go home and make stuff that I think I would like to see. I think, that's what it is. It's about wanting to sit down in the theatre and wanting to create the kind of thing that I would want to sit down in the theatre to watch. Yeah, I don't think I've ever put that into words, but there you go.
I like that. That's great. So what do you find is the writing process that you kind of engage with when it's like a brand new idea? So obviously you, like you said, you do loads of things where you do like the sound design and stuff for pieces which are kind of really well known and news stories. Yeah. How does the process work when you don't have any of that basis to begin with?
Noodling. If I'm really honest, everything will come from me sitting down at the piano and noodling for a little while. Sometimes it'll be noodling with just the piano. Sometimes it'll be noodling with electronic sounds and seeing what happens. Again, it depends whether I'm collaborating with people. Helen Watts, for example, who I wrote Sleepy Hollow and Mrs. Beaton with, we would thrash out lots of ideas. We would probably drink an awful lot of gin. We would talk our way into the small hours of the morning. And then Helen would come up with either a story treatment or story beats or character development, that kind of thing. That's where That's where we started with something like Sleepy Hollow. Or sometimes if it's a script that I'm working with, it's just looking at scenes, figuring out what I think would need support, listening to directors, listening to actors as well. When you get, when you're sort of writing on the hoof in the room with people, seeing what they need to make a scene work. I think that's something I really love actually about the sort of more theatre sound design side of things, is spending time just watching rehearsals. Just kind of figuring out, because sometimes I can read a script and go, that scene's going to need a little something under there. And then when you go to the read through or where you see it being done in the room, you go, oh no, I'm not going to touch it. They're doing a fine job. I'm going to stay out of their way. So it's a lot about listening and it's so much about collaboration, and throwing ideas into a pot and not being afraid to be wrong and not being afraid to say bad ideas. I think it's that.
I love that. That's great. What is it that draws you to the kind of the time period? Like you said, lots of your shows are kind of, pre-1910, as it were. What is it? Because obviously there's a kind of huge kind of career that people make for themselves for writing incredibly modern stories and kind of almost bedroom dramas, amongst very normal people, and and we have some kind of really large pieces of work come out of that, such as Dear Evan Hansen and all of that kind of stuff. And
I don't know what. I think there's a poetry to the historical world that I don't often see in today. There's a magic to it. There's a sort of a griminess, but also a glamour, and also things like the internet make stories really hard to write. Mobile phones make stories really hard to write. So I'd like worlds where there aren't things like that. Cars sometimes can make stories hard to write. So put them in a horse and carriage, I'm happy. But as I said at the beginning, I do want to write more modern stuff. The podcast musical that I've been working on with Siobhan is a lovely little two-hander between two people who meet on a New York subway. So that was a really interesting thing for me to work on, because it was in the sort of American vernacular, which opened different music up to me and different accents and different rhymes and all that kind of stuff. So that was really fun. I have got my eye on more modern things at the moment. But I think if somebody, came to me with something, I don't know, about the Salem witch trials, I'd be all over it. Like, anything like that it sparks my imagination more than contemporary stories.
But
so I'm trying to make myself be a bit more modern.
How do you kind of how do you solve the problem of the difference in kind of social culture, when you're kind of like telling a story that's based in that kind of older world to an audience of very kind of modern 21st century individuals?
It's always about finding what is relevant and resonant in a piece. So when we did Sleepy Hollow, it was very much about race and colonialism. That's what, when I say very much, I think that was a strand that ran through it, definitely. And Helen's wonderful brain, when I presented her with the short story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, she just said, look, if I can't, the original short story of Sleepy Hollow is incredibly thin. It's about 40 pages and only 4 characters are named in it. And we had to write for 30 members of the NYMT. Mm-hmm. So Helen said, look, I don't want to do this unless I can find at least 5 strong female characters to draw out of this story. And she absolutely did. And so one of the other things in that was about female, not exactly emancipation, but agency. Mm-hmm. So we had these 2 quite strong contemporary themes that ran through this. Similarly, in Mrs. Beeton, our take on the Mrs. Beeton story, Isabella Beeton was a journalist in the 1860s, and she wrote this enormous household management book that really united women up and down the country. They would write their recipes in and they would send them into her, and our take on that was that it was a kind of precursor of the suffragette movement. One of the reasons that women were given during the suffragette movement for not having the vote was that they had power in their own homes. That's what men in government said to them. And we believe that Isabella Beeton is the woman who gave them that power. So again, that was our very contemporary take on things. And Helen, she's a wife and a mother. She understands what it is to have to decide what to cook every night of the week for the rest of her life for her kids.
Yeah.
So she put all of that wonderful energy into it. I think it's finding the relevance and finding the resonance. With Fanny and Stella, it's absolutely about gay rights and trans rights, and identity. Who are you if society says that who you are is wrong? Who can you be? That's the message there. So all those things I think that make stories sing, and maybe that's why I'm excited about older stories, because they have this cross-generational resonance to them.
Yeah. I posted up something on my Facebook yesterday for International Women's Day. And it's funny that you're talking about this, because it actually is exactly about this. And I said, my contribution to International Women's Day is a challenge to all, particularly male composers and writers of musical theatre, to write more stories where we don't need male saviors for women.
Okay.
And it's clear that what you're talking about there is that you're really kind of on one of those people that's really blazing that trail. Do you have any advice for other potentially male but not necessarily writers out there who kind of are interested or feel that it's important to kind of be telling those kind of stories in a really truthful way? Particularly from an experience that you've not lived as somebody who is...
Yeah, one of the hardest songs I've ever had to write was a song called Watch the Light in Mrs. Beeton Says. It's the song that Isabella sings very near the end of the show after she's lost her second child. And I generally write quite fast. Once I've got an idea and a hook and a riff and a lyric, it kind of falls out of me, That song took me about 3 or 4 months to I had to leave it and come back to it. And I constantly interrogating myself whether I should, as a man, be writing about this, whether this was even my story to tell. And I had lots and lots of hearts to heart with Helen about it. And she was hugely encouraging to me, in terms of me constantly checking my work with her, saying, "Is it okay to say this about losing a child? Is this am I allowed?" Yeah, and eventually the song that emerged from that, I was really proud of. But yeah, I think for any men writing women's stories, make sure that you're talking to the women in your life, and then make sure that you're collaborating with women. I think if we'd been two men writing about Isabella Beaton, it would have been a bit icky.
Yeah.
But Helena's book writer had so much input into that. Yeah, I think just make sure that you're talking to people. I don't know if there are things that would be off limits. It's not for me to say. I think it's for each person to feel that as things crop up. Yeah, but again, talk and listen.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. That's great advice. Really great advice. We've got people in the chat saying that a musical about the Salem witch trials would be a dream. So there you go. I think you've got your next hook. Does working with actors influence the way you compose your work? So obviously you've already said that you specifically composed for Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, where you played to people's strengths. But have you ever felt compelled to change something once somebody's playing the role in the piece that you're working on?
I'm trying to think. Have I? I mean, normally when things and I'm talking about musical theatre here, when things get to rehearsal, they are written and finished. And I think I'd like to think that, having been an actor, I know what works. I know that every single note of everything I give to an actor to sing, I've sung it, and I've made sure that there's space for that thought and there's space for that that acting beat, that everything makes sense musically and dramatically and in terms of character. I'm really passionate about that. In my teaching as well. But yeah, I really want to make sure that what the actor is given works. But that's not to say that when I see things done differently in rehearsal that we might change things up.
Yeah.
Again, that's the fun of listening and collaborating. I mean, the thing is, sometimes with really new stuff, directors don't want you in the room all that much, just because you're always tinkering and getting in the way. So it can be difficult to make changes on the hoof. But absolutely, like, you've got to listen to the people who are trying to serve your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I just recorded something over the weekend, actually, with a great friend of mine, Richard Hartley Wilson, and it was a kind of much more poppy song than I've normally written, and he was sort of throwing in a few riffs here and there that normally would make my blood run cold, but he, because of the style of song it was, I had to be open to that interpretation, and that was a joy to kind of go, yeah, actually, I really love that, and I'm about to, start selling the sheet music online. So I've sort of taken some of his riffs and I've put them in, and I've kind of gone, okay, well, this is an optional extra for you. I mean, the thing is, I'm a dreadful control freak. So, so I'm trying to learn to hand things over, especially now that my work is available for people to do and I have no input in it. I have to learn to let go.
I find this a really interesting question to ask people, and so I'm just going to ask it to you here. Do you consider yourself successful? And if not, what would it require for you to achieve in order for you to consider that in order to consider yourself a success?
Well, that's really hard. I mean, I'd say, pandemic notwithstanding, I'm doing all right. The word successful seems a bit icky. It seems a bit sort of, self-congratulatory.
It's very not British, yeah.
Not British. But put it this way, I'm really proud of what I've achieved in the time that I've achieved it. Going back again to the fact that, I've only really been a professional composer for about 6 or 7 years. So yeah, I'm chuffed to bits with where I am. Obviously, you always want more opportunities and more chances to tell different stories in different places, work with different directors. So yeah, I mean, I'm itching to get back in the world, and to sort of put some more stuff into it. I'm working on a Christmas show, gently starting to work on a Christmas show for the Rose in Kingston this year. So it's Beauty and the Beast, which was postponed from last Christmas, obviously. So that is likely to be my first gig, writing gig of the year, and I'm just absolutely desperate for that to happen because we've been so starved of it.
Absolutely. And can I just say to anybody that's watching this, if you've never been to the Rose in Kingston, you absolutely have to go. It's just such a gorgeous little space. And some really, really stunning theatre goes on in there. So it's really worth going and checking it out. Absolutely.
I've been doing their Christmas shows for about 8. This will be my 9th, I think. Yeah, they're always fun and big-hearted, and I'd like to think intelligent and challenging, but at the same time festive and heartwarming. And come visit.
Great, absolutely, definitely. We will definitely be pushing that for you as well. So we've got a lovely question here about your writing and editing process and how you are able to, or not able to, look at your work objectively to know what's working and what isn't. And at what point do you go, okay, it's now finished? So you said, because you said, you want it to be finished by the time it goes into rehearsal. When do you know when that moment is?
When I've stopped losing sleep over it. There is always a point where you go, I think that's perfect. I think I've made a perfect thing. There you go. The collaborators that I work with, Helen, Siobhan, Kieran McConville in Kingston, are good enough writers, but also good enough friends, never to let me get away with presenting something that doesn't work.
And
I wouldn't allow myself to do that. With Fanny and Stella particularly, Siobhan has really put me through my paces as a collaborator and as a dramaturg of songs, and really interrogated every single line. And when I've gone, I just haven't got enough syllables to make that work, or I can't find anything to rhyme with that, he's like, well, then start again. Which is tough to hear, but he's right. So you go, okay, fine, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think the moment that you can, because normally what I'll do is I'll work into the evening and late, and then I'll sort of relax and have, watch a bit of telly, and then just before I go to bed, I'll just have a listen to what I did earlier to check that it's not rubbish, and I go, that's not good. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. So then you lose sleep over it, and you get up early the next morning and you carry on. That's kind of how it works. So at the moment where I can, at 2 a.m, listen to it, quickly go, yeah, okay, I'll sleep tonight.
Yeah. I like that. When you get sleep, you've done a good job.
Yeah.
So it's a good life motto, isn't it? Yeah. So we're just going to take a slight 1-minute break, because what I want to do is I want to just bring everybody that's watching and bring your attention to our amazing MA course that we do at Associated Studios. So if you're watching this and you're not a student of Associated Studios, but you would like to consider coming and working in musical theatre, and you've done a degree already, you can come and do an MA, you can do your postgrad. We have both 1-year and 2-year pathways. So if you've done nursing, for example, but you want to go and be a performer and you think you've got what it takes, then you can come on a 2-year pathway where first year is really great core skills, and then the second year is some really wonderful industry training with really awesome people coming in. People like Eamonn, who is hopefully going to be coming in.
Yes.
next term, hopefully, I believe it is. So so it's going to be really wonderful to see you all there. Applications are rolling in fast, so we don't have a huge amount of spaces left, because we're seeing some really incredible people already. So if you're interested, please get in touch with us. It's www.associatedstudios.co.uk, or you can email us at info@associatedstudios.co.uk. And there's loads of students currently in the chat on Facebook. So if you want to ask them any questions about Associated Studios, you can feel free to do that. And if you're currently in the chat, please feel free to ask us some more questions. So this has been the kind of the hardest week, I think, for everybody, because this is kind of like, we started, we're on like week 7 or 8 now, and so everybody's just kind of getting a bit zoomed out.
The weeks just keep getting harder.
They really, really do. They really do.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? The kind of like, especially over the past year, like you say, you've been continuing to collaborate, and you've got your kind of your gig sorted for Christmas. How do you really see through the kind of the doom and gloom perhaps of the world, or indeed the kind of the relative uncreativeness of being stuck at home all the time? Like, how do you get past that as a creative?
I mean, what I've really found is, if I am not doing something creative, then I just start to kind of shut down. I've normally got a really good work ethic, and I can have 3 projects on the go, and I can know that I'm going to get up and I'm going to dedicate 2 hours in the morning to that, and then do a phone call about that, and then go to a production meeting about that, and I can, and I love that habit, and then go to a rehearsal in the evening, and I love having all of those plates in the air. The less I have to do, the less I seem to want to do any of it.
Yeah.
Which has been a real eye-opener, actually, in the last year. I've got 3 amateur choirs that I run, so they've really kept me quite busy, because I'm doing them on Zoom every evening. So when I finish with you, I've got my choir down in Richmond that I do on Zoom on a Tuesday night, and that means I've got to arrange music and then record it, so I sing all the voice parts, and then they sing along with me singing it over Zoom, so they're all on mute, and I'm still waving my hands around and trying to give them some kind of a sense of community and satisfaction and music. So that's generated, those 3 groups have generated quite a lot of work, because the recording and the editing of all that kind of stuff that has to be done each week.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky in that I've got A, a bit of income, but B, also quite a lot of admin and musical work that I have to do during the week. But I really have found that I've needed to keep writing. And there's only been a few dips in that. As I said, I finished off Fanny and Stella in lockdown 1. That was great. Then I started work on Unexpected Beautiful, which is the podcast musical that I'm hoping will be out later this year. And I did some film work earlier in January and February, a couple of little short films. So that was really great, because that's a bit of my portfolio that I've sort of neglected because I've been so busy with the theatre. So that was lovely to work on. And I'm hopefully starting an orchestration gig next week. So again, like, there might be only 1 plate at a time, but it just becomes a really important plate to keep. And yeah, when I don't have that, I started to go, I'll just put on Netflix and
yeah. Yeah, and do you know, it's so interesting, because we've been one of the reasons why we're doing this is to show people that there's still stuff happening, that I think that's really important. It's that like you said, like you go to your choir every week, and you give them that sense of community, and that's what this is really all about, isn't it? It's about kind of like letting people in the world see the industry's still turning, like people are still being creative. There's still things being born out of the past couple of years, perhaps in a slightly different way, perhaps in a slightly slower pace, but people are still kind of engaging, and I think it's really inspiring.
A lot of work being created. And I sort of think, obviously everything depends on the finances, but there will be a glut of stuff that people like me and will have to go right. what were you doing? Well, I've made an album, or I've written a new show, and that's really exciting. As things, even June the 21st still feels like half a lifetime away.
Yeah.
But just to kind of know that there is all that richness of creativity that we're yet to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got another question for you, actually, which is a very, very slightly different category, I guess. So I remember the moment for me when, and I remember it really vividly, and I've talked to my students about it more than once, about that moment where where I realised that, like, where my heart lied and where my artistry lied was not necessarily standing in front of thousands of people every night, and that I could be I felt like I could be more productive in the industry and more engaged in what it is that I had to offer, and I could still say what I had to say by being a teacher. Did you have a moment like that when you were kind of moving from being an active musician into being a more kind of a different kind of creative, or is there still a bit of your blood that pumps around your body asking you to go back to that?
Okay. Absolutely, there was a moment. It's quite a good story, actually. I was in a wonderful production of Fiddler on the Roof, actor music production. Craig Revel Horwood directed it. Sarah Travis MD'd it. One of the most wonderful companies of actors that I've worked with. I'm still such good friends with them all, and it was one of those a wonderful use of actor musicians, like 17 actor musicians on stage. All really, really talented people, playing together, acting together. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And Paul Michael Glaser was playing Artevier. Paul Michael Glaser was Perchik in the film of Fiddler on the Roof, and he was Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. So he has a big following, and he had the kind of connection to the original film. And he was Artevier, and he got very sick in the week of Tech. And Craig came to me and said, "Will you be Tevier?" I wasn't covering Tevier; somebody else was covering Tevier. But because this happened, and there'd been no understudy rehearsals, and none of those structures were in place, Craig said, "Will you be Tevier?" And I was like, "I just call my agent." And one thing led to another, and the next morning I was stood on stage with a script in my hand, teching Tevier in with all my colleagues, teching their parts in, and going, "Hang on, yesterday you were the innkeeper." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, it's really weird." And I teched the show while Paul got better. Paul got better for previews. I did like 1 or 2 previews in the Mayflower in Southampton. And I remember, sorry, there's a child crying outside my window. I remember the day of my first preview, and I was standing in the wings, and it was a full Mayflower, so like 1,500 people, I think, in that barn. And I was sort of thinking, this should be this. This is all I've dreamed of. This is playing a lead. I'm about to walk on stage and play the lead in a #1 touring classic musical. This should be everything I've ever wanted. And I think I was about to say I couldn't care less. That's not true, because I could care less, because I did it, and I did it okay. I got away with it. But I just realised that in that moment I said, this isn't really what I want. This isn't really what I want. And that was a real sort of epiphany, actually. And oddly, I think removing all of that stress from myself, removing that, oh my God, this is everything. I've got to invite agents. I've got to invite producers. I've got to invite all these people. I just went, I don't really want to do this anymore. And that enabled me just to saunter on stage and be this, 60-year-old Jewish milkman, which couldn't have been further from my casting at the time. I sort of got away with it, I think, because I just went, in the very Tevier way, what are you going to do?
Exactly, yeah.
So removing that stress and removing that tension from my body, I think, just made me go, okay, fine, I think I can pull this off. It's a ridiculous ask that I've had to learn this titan of a part in a week. and do it. Here goes. So yeah, definitely that was the moment.
It's so interesting because it was a similar. My story is very similar in that, I was offered a role and I kind of went, no. I'm just going,
Yeah.
no. There's no part of my being my brain is telling me, why you not? This is like such a good opportunity for you, Scott. This is such a good opportunity, and my whole body, my heart was just going, no, actually, you don't need that in your life. And it's so funny how you have those moments, and I think kind of like the advice to everybody watching, if you're out there and you're struggling through this, it might feel like the biggest thing at the moment, but it won't always be. And I think you've always got to kind of listen to what you're telling yourself. And just because you maybe want to take a different path or something, I think is a really important thing to realize that doesn't mean that you've failed in the one that you were on. Actually, it's often in the moment of success, right?
It's important. I've been in the industry for nearly 20 years now. And so along that way, I've met a lot of amazing performers who are now no longer doing it. And it's a really brave thing to go, do you know what? It's not for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bit of a stigma and there's a bit of a shame about it that we have to get rid of because it's a hard life. Yeah. It's a really hard life to be on stage because actually for most of your life, you're not on stage, you're off stage. And that's really tough. And for some people, it's not sustainable, and that's got to be okay. We've got to be okay with that.
I agree. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's such a strong message. Yeah.
Well.
I've got one more question I'm going to ask you, then I'll let you attend to your child. Because I feel
it's not my child.
Oh, is it not your child? So just your child. All right, okay. Thought I was keeping you.
No.
Basically, this comes from one of our students and says, as you've written some great music using such amazing Gothic classics such as Sleepy Hollow and hopefully the Salem Witch Trials, as source material. This is becoming a thing now. People are going to be asking you when it's coming out. If any producers are listening, throw lots of money his way. I'm sure he'll go on to it. Do you ever feel pressured or influenced by previous incarnations of those texts? And in what way do you feel like you have the ability to change a text like that in order to tell the story?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Thank you. With Sleepy Hollow, as I said, the story, not a great deal happens. So we really had to extrapolate and invent a whole lot of stuff. And we really wanted to give, we had a cast of 28, I think it was, and that was 18 sort of 15 and upwards, and then a cast of 10 kids who were all named. They were all named characters, and they all had their own sort of personalities, but they were sort of the kids ensemble and then older characters. And we really wanted to give all of those older kids a crack of the whip. So we created characters for all of them, and really wanted them all to have some kind of a bit of agency and import in the story, which created us so many problems. And I do remember one sort of dark night of the soul with, Helen in Dorset, me on the phone in London, me sitting in my garden just going, have we made a terrible mistake? Like, we've tied ourselves in knots with this. We've absolutely tied ourselves in knots. It's so complicated we can't get out of it. Anyway, and that night, didn't tell Helen this at the time, but I went away and I watched the Tim Burton version, which is, I don't know if anyone's seen it recently, but it's enormously dated now. And I kind of went, oh no, it's all right. Like, he's done something so different with it. We'd made it about race, but also about religion and about science and about feminism in part. And he'd gone, the full Hammer horror, heads rolling left, right, and centre. And actually, in that moment, I just had renewed faith in what we were doing. Yeah. And I was kind of went, right, no, actually, we can make it work. And within a couple of days, we'd sorted out the knots in our story and we'd found a way through it. But yeah, it's always slightly daunting. For example, with Beauty and the Beast that I'm doing at Christmas, there's Hans Christian Andersen's original, and then there's Disney. And a lot of the iconic imagery that people associate with Beauty and the Beast has come from the Disney film that we can't touch. We cannot have talking candlestick, or otherwise we'll have a lawsuit on our hands.
Yeah.
So you've got to, in that scenario, especially at Christmas, especially with a family show, you've got to be aware of what people want and expect, and then deliver something that is interesting and still will engage them and won't make them go, oh, it's nothing like, they've got to recognize the differences and enjoy them, rather than go, oh, I really wish there was a teapot in it. Sorry, that was a really convoluted answer to a
it seems simple, but I think these are really important things especially for performers to understand as well. You know, that process that needs to take place.
Yeah, you have to. If there are incarnations of a story that's gone before, I think it's useful to be aware of them. Not necessarily useful to immerse yourself in them, or if someone else has written a musical about the same thing, kind of steer clear. Probably, and there are several other versions of Fanny and Stella. I haven't listened to them. I know there's another version of Sleepy Hollow. I haven't listened to it. In that sense, no. But sometimes, if people have done other treatments of that same material, it's good to just dip your toe in and go, oh, okay, I'm going to look around and then back off and stay in your own head.
Yeah. Because I think that has loads of parallels with playing roles that are kind of very well known as well. It's that kind of thing of, yes, you have to stand on number 4 and sing that note in that place, but there needs to be an element of you kind of not necessarily trying to emulate who is being in that position, but actually creating for yourself what makes sense to you. Yeah.
I once saw a production of Company where the actor playing Bobby had copied every gesture of Adrian Lester's performance from the Donmar Warehouse.
Yeah.
It was the most horrific thing I've ever seen. Anyway.
Yeah. And on that note.
Don't do that, kids. You're watching.
Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's been such a pleasure.
It's been all our pleasure. We've really
I hope all the Facebookers have enjoyed it too. And
well, I'm sure they absolutely have. I'm sure I'll hear all about it.
What I can do.
Yeah. You're going to get emails inundated about it now. So when's this show releasing now? Yeah. Yeah, Cameron McIntosh is going to be on the phone in talks already. Yeah, that's it. But
thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
And hopefully see you all at the studios in the flesh.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't wait to get back. I'm sure you're feeling exactly the same, to see some people face to face. But
just to hear singing in the same room.
Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thank you so much for that, Eamonn.
Such a pleasure.
And, take care, and we'll see everybody else at 6 p.m. next week. I think we've got Martina Lairds, the amazing actress Martina Lairds, is going to be joining us. So join in for that, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye.
Bye.